Let's bring in Sky News political editor Andrew Clennell. Well, great to have you back for 2024. I really feel the year's now kicking off that you're back in the seat there in Canberra. Well, I think you're in Sydney tonight, but you're certainly following everything pretty closely for us, Andrew. PM's been quizzed pretty hard over the years, ever since Labor voted for those tax cuts, stage 3. We know at the time they didn't want to vote for them. They did in the end. They took them to 2 elections. 100 times is on the record saying they would not change, but change looks like it's coming.
Well, it is, but, you know, it hasn't happened yet, Peter, and what we could see is more money for lower and middle income earners and not much of a change at the top end. That would be wise politically ahead of a by-election. Anything else
where's the money
in terms
come
of
from?
anything else well, they do have a surplus, but what I'm saying is anything else, and the suspicion is there will be tinkering at the higher end. You're right, they'll be smashed with the old broken promise accusation. And that seems a bigger risk than I would take, Peter, I have to say, if I was in the PM's chair.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. And when I've sat there in those budget meetings and you look at tax cuts, I mean, just turning the dial a little bit is tens of billions of dollars. I mean, this is the problem they've got. They might have a skinny surplus now. They won't have a surplus after the next budget. We know we're drowning in debt. We know there's a caucus meeting tomorrow, a very expensive $500,000 worth of picture opportunity there. There's also been a cabinet meeting this afternoon to tick off what all the backbenchers will be told tomorrow, which the Prime Minister's already probably got in his speech for Thursday. What can you tell us? Do we have any drum out of Canberra?
No, the only drum I have is I do expect the tax cuts to be broadened to include lower and middle income earners. And I think there'll be more, perhaps, energy bill relief and that sort of thing. I mean, I would think it's a broad gamut of things on the cost of living front, and that's what he'll be addressing at the National Press Club Thursday. You'd expect nothing less. Everyone knows that's the only issue in town. They've got a by-election they can lose at 6%, and it's tight, I understand. The Liberals have a chance there. It's not going to be easy, but they have a chance. There's got to be a swing against the government, given the political environment. So I think that's roughly, broadly, what we can expect. That's all people are going to pay attention to anyway. They might have other things to talk about, Peter, but people will only care about the cost of living measures.
Look, in the seat of Canning, the incumbent Liberal there died in office. It was a coalition government in power. Slight swing, but the government held. The same thing happened in the seat of Aston. Peter Nugent died in office 2001, if I remember rightly. Again, Howard government was in office. Yes, there was a swing against them, but they held on. You'd expect, even though I think the government's on the nose in some of these working class aspirational seats, there's no doubt about that. I think the fact that Peter Murphy was well loved and she's died in office, they're not in much trouble in Dunkley, I suspect.
I don't know, Peter. I don't know. I mean, they've had 12 interest rate rises. I think both sides are doing a bit of expectation management at the moment. That Aston by-election, by the way,
I think the government certainly is.
Was Aston by-election 2001. There was, I think, about a 6% margin, and Howard copped about a 4% swing. And only maybe a year earlier, it introduced a GST, or not long earlier. So, and he'd been in office a fair amount of time. So he's still got a 4% swing against him.
Well, what?
So why?
Yeah, but
why
what was interesting then, my husband ran that campaign. I remember it well. My husband ran that campaign. Yeah, but what was interesting there, if you remember back in 2001, there was the issue of petrol indexation. And remember, Howard came under some real pressure to drop petrol indexation. Now,
he
didn't want to do it. I think there was, there was opposition from Costello at the time, and he did. And people think the turnaround in 2001 was at the end of the year with Tampa and the 9/11 sort of election in that November, but it actually really kicked off from Aston. So, I think we'll all be looking very closely at Dunkley. And now, of course, mate, we've got a by-election in the offing with Cook. But Scott Morrison says he's going today, but he won't actually formally resign, will he, for about a month?
Yeah, and that costs the taxpayer, Peter, to be honest with you. I mean, it costs them at least $500,000 because as much as that's been made of the caucus meeting, which costs the same and it's controversial, and why couldn't you have that in 2 weeks? if Scott Morrison gave his letter to Milton Dick, the Speaker, today, and they had that by-election the same day as Dunkley, it'd cost significantly less. But he wants to stay until the end of February. Now, one of the reasons for that is a valedictory speech, fair enough. But I think that will be a question in coming days. Shouldn't he just go if he's going and save the taxpayers a bit of money in those by-elections? We've got the annoyance now of two by-elections probably about a month apart.
Yeah, look, I think the criticism there of Scott Morrison is fair. I mean, announcing it and waiting around for a month, he'll use all the resources of his office to clean things up and pack things up and all of that. And yes, he's a former Prime Minister and they get to go of their own choosing, but I think being mindful of the dollars is smart at this time. Hey, before Christmas, we talked about reshuffles. We know that one is due on the coalition side and one has certainly been talked about on the government side, particularly in relation to Linda Burney. All that speculation yesterday, I mean, I saw that piece in The Australian, another go at it today. We need an Indigenous Governor-General. That seems to me preparing the ground that Burney may well be announced. Of course, then she'd leave the Parliament. But do you think there is a reshuffle, given Parliament's back in a couple of weeks? If they're going to do it, they've got to do it quick.
No, I don't think so, because I think it'll be happening this week. So if he's going to announce it, he'll probably announce it this week, to be honest with you. Otherwise, I think it will wait until later in the year, and that was my previous mail. I don't have any insight into that, into whether anything's changed on that front. I would say he's probably got enough to deal with this cost of living issue package, the by-election and so forth. And significantly, if there is a reshuffle, okay, he might get a couple of poor performers out of the way. It would certainly be controversial after the Voice to make Linda Burney Governor-General. I'm not sure that's the best idea. But I think it's important to note the key roles wouldn't be changing, in my view. So Prime Minister, obviously, Treasurer would remain Jim Chalmers, Finance probably Katie Gallagher, but certainly Defence, Miles, Foreign, Wong. So it's really just shuffling the decks around the edges to some extent. It will be interesting to see how Claire O'Neill goes in Home Affairs, whether he retains faith in her once he does one. There will be one this year. Don't think it'll be in the next couple of weeks, Peter.
Just quickly, do we know where Scott Morrison's heading off for a post-political career, and how do you rate the chances of the coalition holding on to the seat of Cook in the Sutherland Shire in New South Wales? Very
strong. Even though people might be a bit annoyed that there's a by-election. There was a state by-election I covered many years ago there, Miranda, where an MP quit and people got annoyed and actually voted Labor. But I can't see that with Cook. It contains a state seat of Cronulla as well. He's talking about global jobs, which I've speculated on for some time, around the defence space. Good luck to him, I guess. It's pretty harsh on a former PM, I reckon, not getting a pension. He was planning to announce it Australia Day, but after I broke the news today, Peter, he had to come forward with it. But nevertheless, he was planning, as I understand.
Forced his hand.
Yeah, I did actually. But I think it's interesting. It doesn't change that by-election dynamic because I've only pushed it forward or Sky's only pushed it forward by a couple of days.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Andrew. Great to have you back on deck.